Sherilyn Skolnicki, and this is Brilliant Balance, the show for working women who are ready to shine. Each week, I bring you ideas, inspiration, and insight on balance, business, and getting it all done gracefully. You ready? Let's be brilliant. This is episode 259 of the Brilliant Balance podcast. And today I'm sharing my 10% rule to give a guilt-free no. All right, welcome back to the show. I'm so glad you're here with me today because this is a subject that I know someone listening really is going to benefit from. Like, this is a subject that I've sort of evolved my way to through the coaching practice and never occurred to me to share it on the podcast. So I'm really excited to do that with you today because I know that so many of us struggle to say no, right? Whenever we get requests for our time, especially. Could be requests for anything, but I'm specifically going to talk about requests for our time. We feel like we owe it to whomever is asking to give them our time. And the reality is time is finite. It's the one resource we have that actually really is finite. We can't get it back. And so every single yes that we give to someone, when they ask us for our time, is a no that we are inherently giving to someone else. That someone could be ourselves. It could be our family, our children, our employer, our friends. Like, we're saying no to someone sort of silently every time we say yes. So getting better at deciding with intention where we invest our time is so critical. And I talk about this all the time because I think we need some frameworks to help us really set boundaries and make decisions and learn to say no. And the way that I think is so interesting, it just works almost magically to do this, is to set a yes limit, right? Instead of really thinking about saying no, what we're doing is limiting our yeses through some sort of a benchmark, a threshold, thinking of it as like a time tax or maybe a time tithe. What is the amount of our time that we are willing to say yes to and essentially give away? And so if you're not familiar with the concept of tithing is, in the Christian community, the concept of giving 10% of your income back to the church. You could think of it as to charity, right? It's typically thought of as after-tax income, 10% of your after-tax income going to the church or to charity. And so I think whether we agree with that number or not, or the concept or not, I want to sort of anchor us in it because it's the principle that I'm going to use to give us some freedom and relief around our volunteer time, essentially giving of our time to others. So the question I want you to ask yourself is, what would it look like to tithe, or you can think of it as tax, your time by allocating a percentage of it to others? And I'm going to talk specifically about volunteering here because I think that's really where we get tripped up, right? So start with some basic math. We have 24 hours in a day, 7 days a week. That is 168 hours per week that are available to us to allocate to whatever we see fit. Okay. So we have to come up with some sort of like after-tax number, the equivalent of that metaphorically. And the first thing I'm going to do is take out the hours that we're allocating to sleep. And I'll just use 8 hours a day for sleep, which would be 56 hours, right? 7 days times 8 hours a day, 56 hours that we want to protect for sleep. Because if you've listened to this podcast for more than 5 minutes, you know that this sits at the epicenter of everything that I teach, right? If we don't get enough sleep, we're kind of worthless. So we're certainly not going to keep those hours in the mix as available. So we take out 8 hours a day for sleep. That leaves us with 112 waking hours in a week. Let's assume that you work, you have a job to do, and that you work 40, 50, 60 hours a week. Let's just pick a number here and go with 50 that you can reasonably allocate to work. Now, you're welcome to redo this math on your own, but if you use that 50 hours, that's going to leave you with 62 hours per week for everything else. 62 hours for showering, for making dinner, for driving the carpool, right? All the carpools in my life, for helping with homework. That 62 hours has to cover shopping, required shopping as well as fun shopping. It has to cover all of your online browsing. It has to cover cleaning. Any time that you allocate to working out or watching a movie or going to lunch with your mom or standing in line at Starbucks, right? Anything that you do besides work and sleep has to fit into that 62 hours a week. And we all know that in addition to all of those things that I was just saying, there seems to be this line of people, sort of imaginary line of people asking for our time. So one way to think about how much of our time to give to that line of people asking for it is to use that tithing principle and to say, what if we allocate just 10% of that discretionary unpaid time, those 62 hours a week, to use as a give back, to say maybe 10% of my time is a fair amount for me to use to give to causes beyond my own needs. So that would be 6 hours a week, roughly, right, in total. And that would go to places like your children's school, when they need PTA volunteers or they need room moms or they need people to make things for the bake sale or work at the concession stand or whatever the opportunities are for you to volunteer at your kid's school. Those 6 hours a week would go to your church for any of the volunteer opportunities there, whether it's serving within the service or teaching Sunday school or being a part of, a fall leaf raking opportunity with them or working at their festival or any of the myriad of things that you might do within your church. These 6 hours a week would be partly allocated to the broader community, right? Maybe you volunteer with a nonprofit in your community, like the animal shelter or the food bank, or you do the park cleanup, right? Maybe you volunteer at the library. Anything that you do in your community would come out of this. If you are a coach of a child's sports team or academic team, or you help with the drama or theater department, all of those hours could be a part of this. If you are working as a scout leader, right, that would go into this. So I want you to think broadly about the time. Maybe you mentor someone and that is unpaid work that you do. Maybe you're in Big Brothers, Big Sisters, like all the things, right, that we could be giving our time to. We want to add up. And if you want a benchmark, 10% of waking hours would say 6 hours a week in total. You could do some quick math and go 24, 25 hours a month potentially could get allocated. Do you ever find yourself saying, I just need a minute to breathe? While the whole idea of meditation can sound totally intimidating, I've found that stepping away from the chaos of life, even just for a few minutes, is incredibly restorative. So if you're short on time, but could use a few moments of peace right about now, listen to my 5-minute meditation for working moms. It'll help you clear your head and come back to your day feeling centered and refreshed. Head over to brilliant-balance.com/breathe. Press play and settle in for a few mini moments of peace right now. So we'll pause there for you to do some math of your own and take a look back at your calendar and benchmark, right? Am I way over that number? And am I feeling really constrained about my time? Am I way under that number, but I've been feeling this nudge, like maybe I should get involved with something, right? I want you to really get your number of what percent of your discretionary time today, like as a baseline, is being allocated to giving your time, right? I'm going to use the term volunteer, right? As a community member in unpaid work where you're using your gifts in service to others. We all have causes that are on our hearts, and we absolutely can feel called to give our time to them. And I want you to do that. I love doing that. I particularly love in this season of life when I have children at home with me, giving my time in ways that I can do it with them. Right. So I made this change when my kids started school that I would devote most of my volunteer time to hands-on effort where I was visible to them. So rather than being like on the board of an organization in this season of life, I wanted to do hands-on service in a way that my child can see me or participate with me in that experience. So things like working at the concession stand during a game, or the ticketing booth during a game, or being involved in their classroom, or supporting, right now we're doing set builds backstage for a play that my son is in. So those kinds of things to me feel like I get a little bit of a 2-for-1. I can be of service to an organization and I can be visible and spend incremental time with my kiddos, which has been a nice blend. I got that advice from an entrepreneur. Man, I bet it was a decade ago. And it just really made a difference in helping me decide where was I going to give a yes and where was it going to be at not right now. And then on top of that, thinking about what is reasonable, because we really can get so guilt-ridden with the number of requests that come in. And when we start to realize like, man, I am bumping up against the ceiling of my time, but I just don't know how to say no to this person. I wonder if this can give you something solid to grab onto, like to share with them, hey, I actually made a commitment to allocate, and it doesn't have to be 10, right? You could say 15% of my time, 5% of my time, of my available discretionary time to volunteer work, and it's already been allocated in this season, right? So while I can appreciate the need for your organization, my capacity has already been allocated. And, you can say, should that change if I sunset one opportunity, I may be able to create space for this one. And by the way, you can regularly do that. You can regularly look at where is your time going? What are the causes you're supporting? And say, you know what? I think it's someone else's turn to do this one. For years, I served on the stewardship commission at our church. And I really feel great about some of the legacy work that I was able to do there, where we got some practices in place that are now long-standing traditions. But there was a time when it was my turn to step off of that and to give other people, their turn to lead. And I moved on to other places where I could be of use. And that's a really healthy way to think about your volunteer and nonprofit commitments, that they run for a season and then it's someone else's turn. So setting a limit, I think, can help us stay warm and fuzzy about giving our time, which is really how we want to feel. We want to feel open-hearted and generous, and like we want to come back feeling good that we did this thing. And if we over allocate, if your time percentage is running higher than your life really can sustain, that's where we start to feel raw and resentful. And that's not the energy that we want to bring to those experiences. It's not the energy we want to bring to our peers who are volunteering with us or the people that we're serving. So if you are able in this season of life to allocate more than 10% of your discretionary time, that is a number that is very personal to you. There are people who tithe more than 10% of their income, right? So I'm just trying to give you a benchmark of something that you can grab onto to help you make choices day by day, week by week, as those requests come in. And I will say this, sometimes it's helpful to think of this on a monthly basis instead of weekly, because there will be seasons where you go into allocating like a full day of your time or a full weekend of your time here and there. So it might fluctuate from week to week, or it might fluctuate from month to month. You might know that you're really involved with like the Special Olympics, and because they happen in a particular season, you might be really heavily involved then, right? Or you coach, and so you give a ton of time in the fall sports season, but then you don't do that in the winter and spring. It doesn't have to be even Steven, right? Where every week is exactly the same. We're trying to find this benchmark and maybe track it to see if it helps you find a limit that you can really live with and feel great about, and that you can find some peace of mind when it's time to say no. Okay, that is all for today, my friends. Until next time, let's be brilliant. I am back next week with the 5-year anniversary episode of this podcast. Y'all, I cannot even believe that it has been 5 years of podcasting. I am just humbled and so tickled that we have gotten to the 5-year mark. So I'm doing something super fun next week. I'm bringing my team onto the podcast, and they are going to share with you their favorite podcast episodes, some of the ones that they go back to again and again, or that really change something in their thinking. I'll share mine too. And I am just excited to celebrate the 5-year anniversary of the show with you next week. All right, that's all for today. Till next time, let's be brilliant.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.